and like to introduce you to Dr. Anita Rose. I think many of you already know Anita. Anita is consultant clinical neuropsychologist at the Raphael Medical Centre. Have I got that right? And she's also...
You have, I've just moved.
Ah, there you go. I'll make sure we get the notes for the video then. Yeah. And we're very grateful to have you here, Anita, and you've got a special interest in managing neurofatigue. So can I hand over to you, please?
Yeah. That's fine. Welcome, everybody. My screen seems very full of lots of people and lots of, I can't see photographs, pictures of everybody, but I guess people are joining. Now, what I'm going to do is not just talk, because I think it'll get a bit boring with just me and a blank wall behind me. So I am going to share the screen at certain for part of the talk. And the reason for that is if you've got a phone nearby and you just want to take a quick shot of the screen just to remind you of something I say, we know that when you're tired, you're fatigued, when you're trying to remember things, you're going to get more fatigued, and it'll help you to remember the talk as well as having the recording. I also will let Liz have my slide set as well, so I'm happy for people to have that as well. So if you bear with me, I will share my screen a little bit, but I think that's more to help you as well as help me, because otherwise it just gets a bit monotonous. So I guess we all experience fatigue at some point in our lives. I don't know about many of you, if you've been in lockdown, whether just going day by day, doing very little, you get to the end of the day and you think, why am I so tired? I've done nothing. But actually, you've probably used a lot more energy than you would have done if you had conserved your energy and done lots of different tasks. Now, the problem we have with fatigue is it's extremely difficult to define. So I'm just going to share my screen, if you just bear with me 2 minutes. So I don't know about many of you, but when we get very fatigued, you feel like, and we use the term, I've hit the wall. It's like you cannot go no further. You've started walking, going out for a lovely walk, and suddenly you can't do any more. And the problem is, how do you describe that? How do you tell somebody what you are feeling? Because it's very subjective. It's how you feel. And no one else can understand how you feel. Many people say it's a sense of physical tiredness, it's a lack of energy, but even that's really hard to describe. So as clinicians, we try and come up with ideal definitions. And the definition we use most frequently is this one, which in a minute I'm going to take apart and criticise. So fatigue is a subjective lack of physical and or mental energy that is perceived by the individual and or his caregiver to interfere with the usual or desired activities. So what does that actually mean in that, if we talk about it? Well, actually what it means is you feel something that you may describe as tiredness, you may describe as my brain's dead, my brain's foggy, my legs don't work, I can't lift my arms to do a task. Although you can do those things, you can lift your arms, you can move your legs, but it feels like you're in treacle, maybe. So that's your experience, that's what you are feeling. And you've perceived that and you're trying to describe it. But also equally, you may think, actually, I'm fine, I've got lots of energy, but your loved one, your husband, your partner, your mum, your dad, your brother, your sister, whoever, may say, well, you know, we never seem to be able to go out for a nice walk, or we never seem to be able to plan having family round for a meal or having a party like we used to. And the reason for that is that just trying to organise that is so draining that you can never get to the point of completing that task. But you think you can do it, but you've started not doing it, and someone else may notice, for example, your leg may start dragging when you're walking and you think you're still walking normally. So fatigue is subjective. It's very hard to give you an objective definition. So I've been involved now with Cavernoma for a few years. I've just gone onto the Trustees board as well. And so I've got to know many of you personally, and I've also have patients with Cavernomas. either newly diagnosed patients or patients that have had them for many years. And when I speak to them and we talk about some of the difficulties they may experience, one of the things I may say is, and do you find that you get fatigued, you get tired quicker doing things? And the things they tell me is that they have motor fatigue, that I find it really hard. My legs feel like they're in treacle when I'm walking, or my arms just feel so heavy. So a bodily fatigue, something that's in your motor system that means you have to move your arms and legs, for example. Some will just say, do you know, I feel like some days my brain is just in a massive fog, or my brain just feels dead. I go to do a task and I start it and it's just like brain ache, brain freeze, brain fog, those sorts of descriptions. Now I know that as cognitive fatigue, because physical fatigue, we can understand. If you're outside now on a running up and down your garden like we had Major Tom doing, or walking up and down your garden for a day, or you were hitting a punch ball or something, you would get fatigued. We all would. That's motor fatigue. What's harder to understand is when I sit at the computer, which many of us are having to do day in and day out now in a way we never used to, you may be finding that it just becomes too much, becomes overwhelming. And that's because your brain is working 4 times, 5 times, 6 times harder than it ever usually does. They tell me that as a result of that, they have less motivation to do things. They find it harder to plan things. Some people just say, I just can't be bothered. It's not that, but that's the only way I can describe it. Some people say they have changes in their behaviour. They feel more irritable. They get more angry at times. They withdraw maybe. Some people say that if they sleep or rest, they need to be done in very, very quiet and calm surroundings. But I have the birds outside in the morning because of the dawn chorus, or my kids cry, or all those normal things we all experience. But for someone with Cavernoma, that could be much more devastating. They say they yawn excessively. They're always yawning. And some people say they sweat in a way they never used to during fatigue. So they're experiencing fatigue, and these are the subjective experiences that I as a clinician would say that means they're suffering with fatigue. Now, what does research tell us? I'm a clinician. Everything I say has to be based on research. I'm a scientist. I look at research. And actually, there's very little that says, there's very little research out that says much at all. Some papers mention that fatigue is a problem after surgery predominantly. Well, that's normal. Most people that have surgery, whether it's in their brain or in their leg or anything else, will suffer fatigue. It's part of the anaesthetic system, getting out of your system. It's part of you become deconditioned after surgery. So whilst that's mentioned predominantly after surgery, that's possibly not particularly just about having a Cavernoma. Now, when I did a search to look at all the recent research, I found no paper that actually specifically covered fatigue as a problem. There were papers that mentioned, some people report it, but it's small numbers, but there was nothing that actually talked about fatigue in Cavernoma. And I guess for many of you that becomes a problem, because how do you describe to your doctor, your GP, anyone else that you're dealing with that you have fatigue? Because they're likely to say, that's not your Cavernoma. That's likely to be something else. Or, well, just do some more exercise, or they might suggest something like that. So let's think about fatigue as a problem. Forget the Cavernoma moment, just think about what fatigue does and how it might be experienced in neurological conditions. So what do I know about fatigue with people that may have had a brain injury, a stroke, have multiple sclerosis, have Parkinson's? What do we know about neurofatigue? Well, we know it can come on quickly. You can do a task, I don't know, empty your dishwasher, and suddenly you're too fatigued. But it can also build up during the day. So in the morning, you may have energy, you may do lots of things, and then suddenly in the middle of the afternoon, there is nothing else you can do except perhaps go and lay down. Or it can just come on. There's no rhyme or reason. There's nothing you can say caused that fatigue. Sometimes fatigue happens the day after the event. So you've had a brilliant day. You've partied till sundown. You've done all those wonderful things you wanted to do, all your shopping, all those different tasks that you planned for the day. And the next day, you can't even lift your head off the pillow. You are that exhausted, fatigued. We know what triggers there are for neurofatigue. We know that physical and mental work, so doing something physically, being on the computer, triggers fatigue. We know if it's hot or humid, fatigue can be experienced more significantly. For very, very few people, if they get very cold, it triggers their fatigue. It's normally heat. We know that if people eat a very heavy meal at any point during the day, so perhaps a nice big steak with lots of trimmings, they get halfway through and they find they just can't lift their knife and fork. They get that fatigued, and then they feel very fatigued after it. We know that infections can trigger fatigue. So for many people with a neurological condition, if they get a cold, they get a urinary tract infection, an ingrown toenail even, they can experience fatigue in a more. Having broken or unfresh, no sleep at night, that type of sleep. We've probably all got these Fitbit things now that tell us how we sleep, and we have deep sleep and light sleep and REM sleep. And, if you don't meet all your percentages, then you clearly haven't had a good night's sleep, and it'll tell you your sleep quality was 60% or something. Well, we all have broken sleep, but for people with neurofatigue, it increases that fatigue. Pain. We know that pain is a very fatiguing condition. And for some people that have neurological conditions, they may have something called neuropathic pain. So it's a change due to the nerves from the brain to a part of the body. And the pain isn't because you've banged yourself, you've hurt yourself. It's a disruption in those nerves, and that's called neuropathic pain. And that can be more distressing than normal pain. Not doing something for a very long time, so having long periods where you're just sitting around, can cause fatigue. And being stressed or anxious or depressed can cause fatigue. It can be relieved. Have a rest, you may feel a bit better. You can plan for doing things so that you have some fatigues. But I guess for most of you, the most distressing thing is that people don't understand it. They can't look at you and know that that moment in time you'll experience fatigue, which means it's misunderstood. It's misunderstood by yourself, maybe, by your family, by your medics, which leads to it being underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed. So you go to your GP, I'm feeling really, really fatigued. I don't know what this is about, but I was never like this before I was diagnosed with my Cavernoma, before I had my surgery. And you may be told you're depressed or you're stressed. Have an antidepressant. The trouble is with antidepressants, they can make you more fatigued. And in the end, the fatigue over time can have an impact on your quality of life. Everything is done around your fatigue. It can have an impact on your relationships. We talked earlier about people with fatigue getting irritable and a bit naughty, as my gran used to say. It may be that you find you can't work in the same way anymore, or that your mood or self-esteem is impacted. I wonder if any of that sounds familiar to any of you. Some of it may, some may not. I just want to go very quickly into two types of fatigue, and then I'm going to tell you things you can do to help yourself. So there is what we know is primary fatigue, and that's a direct result of the neurological changes. Okay, so that is directly resulted as a result of maybe your surgery, if you've had surgery, having the Cavernoma. There is some suggestion that if you have a Cavernoma, where it's sited may have a direct relation to fatigue, but as I say, there's very little research around that in Cavernoma. We know that is the case in other neurological conditions. We've already talked about having neurosurgery uses energy, but the cause, the actual reason why people experience fatigue remains elusive, even though we have looked at fatigue in neurological conditions for over 2 decades, maybe longer. In Cavernoma, we still don't really know what's causing it. And what we don't know is whether it's become an exaggeration of normal fatigue. So maybe you were naturally fatigued before, but this has got worse, or whether it's actually unique to the Cavernoma. And that's what we don't know yet. Now, secondary fatigue is the one you suffer with, the one, if you're suffering with fatigue, you have problems with. And it's usually related to other symptoms and you trying to compensate for them. So sleep disturbances. I had a question sent to me during the week from one of you. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the person, but the question was around restless leg syndrome and whether, because that disturbs their sleep, that then impacts on fatigue. Well, yes, we know it does. And we also know that restless leg syndrome is often the percentage of restless leg syndrome in neurological conditions is much higher than in a normal population. So, and we know, even in the normal population, if people have restless leg syndrome, their sleep gets disturbed, and that has a huge impact on their ability to do things the day after and so on. Fatigue, we'd call it. Now, one of the difficulties with restless leg syndrome is it can be treated medically, and it can be treated quite effectively medically. However, some of the medications they use, and there's not many, may make you more sleepy. So therefore, that's going to have an impact on your fatigue. And we also know with restless leg syndrome, we've got to get that medication right. So, but to the persons who asked the question, yes, it's strongly probable if you treat the restless leg syndrome, you may find your fatigue is less. However, if you're treated medically and your fatigue gets worse, it's about then adjusting the medication, because you don't want to get rid of the restless leg syndrome and then be more fatigued as a result of medication. I hope that answers that question. Depression or low mood. We know that depression, with or without neurological conditions, makes people fatigued, makes them feel lethargic, they have lack of energy. So we know that's a secondary symptom. Those neuromuscular factors, what I mean by that is when you are using your muscles, when you're walking, and that's having an impact on your neurological your nervous system, because you have a neurological condition, it can affect your fatigue. Deconditioning, not doing anything, because you get fatigued, so what do? You rest. And then you rest some more, and you rest some more, because actually it's easier to do that than get up and try and do something and be really frustrated because you couldn't do it. And so you start to decondition. Your muscles start to waste, for want of a better word. I've already talked about infections and illnesses and medications I've just mentioned with regard to restless leg syndrome, but often people have neuropathic pain, prescribed medication that can cause more fatigue. Some of the antidepressants can increase fatigue. So sometimes I recommend people go and have a medication review, because often what happens is you go to the GP for one thing, you've seen a consultant for something else, and you've ended up with a number of medications added, and it might be worth having a look to see if any of those are causing it. But secondary fatigue is not directly related to the Cavernoma. It's related to other things that are affecting you as a result of the Cavernoma. I hope that is clear. So what I'm going to suggest is you think of it as layers. So your primary fatigue is at the bottom of your pyramid. And building upon that primary fatigue, so you've got a primary fatigue due to your Cavernoma. Now, you might be depressed as a result of having the Cavernoma. You might just find, this is just too much, I can't. So you're going to take some medication. You've got life. All of us have a life. Some of you may have very young children that keep you up all night. Some of you may have young children you've got to run around the house with. Some of you may still be working in a very stressful work. Some of you may be furloughed at this moment. Some of you may be shielding. Your life, it happens. And life brings with it challenges which can be tiring and cause fatigue. And you have sleep problems and exertion and lack of exercise and diet. And all of these will lead to that primary fatigue being exacerbated. We'll make it difficult. So we look at it in layers. And what we want to do is try and look at some of these layers in order to support changing of the fatigue. So what came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, this chicken seems to think the chicken came first. Does in the dictionary, because C comes before A. And I want to help you now think about what you may be able to do to change your fatigue. I'm going to teach you your ABCs, as it were. So what we're going to do is look at some things that you can do that may help you. Now, I am not saying any of you are lazy because you can't do things because of your fatigue. I'm not saying you must go away and do everything I suggest. Doing everything I suggest will make you more fatigued. I'm not saying you mustn't do certain things. What I'm trying to do is give you some ideas that you yourself may be able to play around with and think about, if I did this, would this help? Trial and error is going to be. Because obviously what I don't want you to do is go away and try everything and get fatigued. Now, one of the things we know in fatigue management is around planning. And planning means making decisions about what task or activity you have to do that's more important than another one. In other words, we're going to prioritise things. It means stopping and thinking. It means realising it's an individual process. So what may work for you may not work for your best friend that also has a Cavernoma. The first step often in planning is getting permission to determine the needs of the person and your families. I don't want to sit and think about this. Well, give yourself permission to do so. And you're going to have a motto, which is stop, think, and then act or go. I want you to think about delegating, which means involving others in tasks, and pacing. And that means in your planning, you're going to build in breaks and rest periods. And when I say breaks and rest periods, I'm not talking about going to bed for an hour. That may be what you plan in. But equally, just sitting down, if you've been standing up all morning, can help reduce fatigue. Changing position, sitting with a magazine, phoning a friend. Doing something different is a rest. So I'm just going to show you this chart. And as I say, I'm going to share you all the slides, but also you may want to look at it. Now, we use this chart in Neurofatigue. It was originally designed to work with MS. It was a chart we worked out for our MS patients, so a number of us did. And it can be really helpful. Now, I want to say first and foremost, this may be helpful. I'm not saying you have to use something like this for the rest of your life, but it may be a way of you understanding what is making you fatigued and maybe helping your family understand that as well. So here you write down your activities. So it means sitting down and thinking about what your activities may be for that day, or what are your general activities. And usually we say, just think about a usual day and write down roughly, I get up at 8, I do breakfast at 9, whatever those activities are. And I want you to do that in the morning of a day. Then what we want to do is get you to think about, when you did that activity, what was your fatigue level? Because what we're doing is creating a baseline for you. And that may be you're not at all tired, right through to being totally exhausted. Then think about that activity. What's the priority? Does it have to be done by you only? I mean, you want to shower yourself, I guess. So that has to be done by you. Maybe an extremely fatiguing activity, but it's one you need to do. Could it be delegated to someone else? Does it need to be done by you because you want to see how you can change it? Is it something you like doing, you don't want to give it up? Or is it an activity that doesn't have to be done, but it's a bonus? And for some of you, it might be helpful to put some of the symptoms down. Do your legs feel like treacle? Are you feeling a bit more twitchy? You've got a headache? Is there anything that's changed? And there's a comment section. And the idea is we get people to do this for a week. And then we can start looking at it, and you can start looking at it and looking at things, you know, that activity I do every morning makes me so tired I can't do anything for the rest of the day. So actually, I could do that activity in bits. I may be able to break it down over the day or over a couple of days. The reality is, picking up everybody's washing every morning around the house makes me really tired. But if I get everybody to pick up their own washing and bring it and put it by the washing machine, that might reduce your fatigue. And actually, maybe someone else can put the washing in the machine, but you can get it out and pick it out. But sometimes what happens is we just keep going and keep going and keep going, and we don't recognise the things we can change. So that might be a helpful way of looking at it. Talked about that. Sorry, I will get you all have the slides. Okay. So exercise and goal planning. So around your activities, you want to plan goals as well. What is my goal for today? What do I need to get done that's important? Now, for me, my goal after lunch, I have to drive to the hospital I'm working at currently, which happens to be down in Salisbury. We're opening a new hospital there for the NHS, and I'm going to be based there for a while. So that's my goal. That I have to do. If I don't turn up, I'm going to get told off by my boss. Now, what else do I have to do today? Well, I have to prepare lunch. That's the goal. And maybe my third goal may be to make sure I get to bed early tonight, because tomorrow we've got the first 18 staff coming on site, and I've got to run an induction. So I can set some goals and set some time frames and make sure that, but I'm making sure those goals are smart. So those goals are specific. My goal is to get to work on time. That's specific. It's measurable. It's measurable by, do I get to work on time? It's achievable. Well, it is, as long as the M25 and M3 are not going to cause me any problems. It's achievable. I'll get there on time. It's realistic. Well, for me, that is realistic. I know I can drive that distance, and I know I can get there. And it's tried. So we've got a goal that has been looked at in a way that makes sense to us. And what we're talking about is conserving your energy. These techniques are about conserving energy. It's about balancing activity with rest. But if you don't understand those activities that you're doing and which ones are causing you the most fatigue, and you don't look at them on a piece of paper in front of you, you're using more energy trying to work it out in your head. And you may think, well, actually, I don't need to rest. I can do all of these things. But maybe you can't. And so what we want you to think about is conserving energy so you can do those activities you want to do. And when I say rest, as I've said already, that does not mean always necessarily laying down. It may just mean moving from inside to go outside in the sunny garden and just rest, unless heat is an issue for you. It may be when you've chopped your vegetables at lunchtime, sitting down and doing it rather than standing up. It conserves energy. Let's think about some of those secondary issues that we've talked about can affect fatigue. So mood state, being stressed. Sometimes I feel like this when I get into work in the morning. I've already done lots of things at home. I've driven a long distance to work, my usual place of work at the Raphael. It's about an hour and 10 minutes drive. At the moment, in traffic, when we're out of lockdown, it's usually about an hour and 20 minutes. And there's so idiots on the road. And you get these motorbikes, you get people doing stupid things, and I get to work and I'm like, give me my coffee, give me my coffee. If you don't get near me, because I'm that stressed. So how can we deal with stress? Well, we can deal with stress in many ways, but one of the techniques I teach is mindfulness. Mindfulness means just taking stock of where you are in that moment in time. Mindfulness is about just stopping, acknowledging you're stressed or feeling frustrated or anxious, and letting it go. Now, it sounds very simple, but it's not that simple. And it's a whole topic that obviously I don't have the time to go through today. But I can send some information out to Liz if anybody feels that's useful. Please let her know, and she'll let me know, and I can send some information out around mindfulness. Or maybe that's a topic we can talk about at another time. It's quite fun. But emotions do cause fatigue. Anxiety, including health anxiety, you know, is this due to my cavernoma? Something's changed. Is it due to my cavernoma? People can get quite anxious about their health. And anxiety is like a churning constantly inside. And it uses a lot of cognitive and physical energy. People with anxiety tend to fidget a lot. They tend to pace a lot. All of that uses energy. And stress, it can be a huge issue. Some people, and I think it's a very small minority, do experience something we call emotional lability. And that means they cry for no apparent reason, or they may laugh for no apparent reason. It's not related to the situation they find themselves in. And all of these emotions can increase fatigue. I've just mentioned about being mindful, and as I say, this is a whole topic in its own right. And, you know, as I say, I'm willing to send some information out. But you can also equally go to Google. I don't often recommend people go to Dr. Google, but there's some really good sites around mindfulness. And as I say, I'm willing to send some information that can be sent, maybe put on the website, of some suggestions where people might like to go. I'd like you, though, for just 1 minute to do something with me, if that's okay, which is a mindfulness exercise. And we're going to do it in a minute. And many of you are sitting there, come on, it's got to finish soon. We haven't got a minute. We have all got 1 minute. So what I'd like you to do is just try and get a bit comfortable where you're sitting. Put your feet flat on the floor if you can. Have a bit of a fidget. And what we're going to do is, I want you, if you're comfortable doing so, close your eyes. Okay. Now, I just want you to be mindful of the tip of your head, where your hair is, your scalp. What does your scalp feel like? Is it a little bit fidgety? Is it sore? Is it itchy? Has it got sunburnt? Does it feel hot? Does it feel cold? Just be aware of the sensations around your head. Now move your thought, your brain down around your jaw area. Are you holding your jaw tight? Does it feel loose? Is it uncomfortable? Is it clicking? Now move your thought and your brain down to your shoulder area, your neck and shoulder. Do they feel tense? Can you feel a draft on the back of your neck? Are you feeling hot or cold? Does your skin feel hot or cold? Just be aware of the sensations there. Now move your thought down your spine into your torso. Is your tummy rumbling? Be aware of sensations. Are you feeling uncomfortable? Does your torso feel tight or loose? Now think of your right arm. Can you feel the sensation under your right hand? Maybe it's on your lap, or it's on just hanging loosely next to you. How does that feel? Can you feel the air against it? Now let's go to your left arm. And now I want you to do the same. I want you to just be aware of the sensations around that left arm and your left hand. The textures that you're feeling where you're resting your hands. As I say, maybe a breeze, or you're feeling hot. Just be aware of those sensations. Now let's move down through your pelvis to your thighs. And your buttocks. Can you feel the texture on what you're sitting? Do your muscles feel tight? Are they loose and comfortable? Can you feel sensation on your skin? And now we're going to move down your legs to your feet. Are they flat on the floor? Is it a warm carpet? Is it a cold laminate? Maybe you're wearing slippers and you can feel the fluffiness inside if they're fluffy, or maybe they're a bit rough because they're a little bit old. Whatever you can feel, just be aware of it. And now I want to imagine a wave gathering at the base of your feet. I want you to visualize a tsunami as the wave goes out of the bay, out to sea, and it gathers, it gets bigger and bigger, and you can see a wave gathering momentum. You can see the white froth on the waves, white horses, as we used to call it as children. And now that wave is going to come in to shore. I want you to visualize that wave coming into shore and coming up from the base of your feet, up through your legs, over your thighs, and with it, it's bringing relaxation. It's ironing out any of those tensions you noted. It's washing them away. And as you visualize that wave coming up through your torso, over your arms, up to your shoulders, just be aware of that relaxation it's bringing with it. And now it's coming up through your neck and crashing over the top of your head and washing back down. As it washes back down to your feet, it's taking with it all the tension, all the aches that you were feeling. It's making you feel more and more relaxed as it goes down through your shoulders, down your arms, over your torso, over your buttocks and your thighs, through your knees, down your legs, and out, and just goes away. And when you feel uncomfortable enough, just open your eyes and come back into the meeting. Now that's a mindful exercise called a body scan. Some of you may have found that useful, some may have just thought, oh, this is a waste of space, but it takes practice to do things like that. It actually took us 1 minute, 32 seconds, I think, according to my watch. And that's partly because I took a little bit longer over it. But at any point during the day, if you're beginning to feel tight and stressed or irritable, all of those emotions will increase fatigue. So maybe stop and just do something like that for a moment. That's what we've just done, the body scan. How about if you have, for another moment, walk outside just for 1 minute. You can set your time. If you say, I haven't got time, I haven't got time, I haven't got time. For 1 minute, step outside. Just look, stand out there in silence. Look up at the sky and contemplate how amazing life is. Listen to the birds, the rustling in the trees. Feel the warmth on the sun on your skin, or if it's raining, and just gentle rain on your skin. 1 minute can make a difference in your rest period to help fatigue. When you're eating, how many of us prepare the meal and just sit there and just eat it, and we don't contemplate what we're eating, and we just jump, and we've finished our food before we know it? How about really using your meal times as your downtime, your rest time? Maybe a time when you're chatting, that's fine, but eat with each mouthful you take in. Really spend time tasting what you've cooked, tasting the saltiness maybe of the meat, or understanding the texture. Is it sweet? Is it sour? And just eating in a more mindful way. And that then is restful rather than becoming a fatigue activity. And some other things with fatigue is about maximizing our physical wellness. Let's stop and think about what we do in our daily life. It may be you need to diet, maybe just lose a little bit of weight. Maybe you need to look at your diet and what you're eating. Whether you're overweight or not doesn't matter. Are you having lots of sugar fixes during the day to try and keep yourself going? One of my patients recently was talking about her significant fatigue, and we looked at her diet, and she was just living off energy drinks because she thought they would give her energy, because that's what they say they do. But actually energy drinks have high caffeine in, and what happens with that is that dehydrates you, but equally gives you that high, that caffeine rush, that sugar rush if you have the full fat ones. But there's it's like jumping off the top of a mountain. it's that huge straight down afterwards. And that can really, really increase fatigue. Now, we've had to reduce that over the last few weeks. She's down to no energy drinks now. And she says she has more energy than she ever did have. So energy drinks are not helpful, nor is drinking lots of black coffee. Water. I'm sitting in my glass of water. Keeping hydrated. 2 litres of water a day really will help reduce fatigue. If you smoke, we know that smoking causes fatigue in general population, as well as neurology. It uses energy. It's not healthy. Maybe think about, if you're a smoker, reducing smoking and see if it has an impact. Alcohol actually makes you significantly more fatigued. Now, I'm not saying don't have a nice glass of wine or beer or cider, but maybe think about how much you drink, and actually, could I drink a little bit less? Would that make a difference? I'm not saying stopping drinking unless you want to, but just think about how much you're drinking, because it gives you sleep, but it's a very disturbed sleep, and actually you wake up feeling worse than you did when you went to bed. Think about your sleep hygiene. Now, what I say to people is, after about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, don't drink any caffeine. Don't have tea with caffeine in it. Don't have coffee with caffeine in it. Don't have a hot chocolate. If you want to milk a drink at bedtime, have a Horlicks or just milk itself with cinnamon in it. Don't drink Diet Coke. Don't eat chocolate. All of those things have caffeine in. Now, you can get caffeine-free ones. That's fine, because we know that caffeine disturbs sleep. Sometimes caffeine disturbs sleep because it means you have to get up a lot of times to go to the toilet at night, because caffeine's a diuretic, makes you wee a lot more. But also we know it disturbs sleep. So think about that. Think about going to bed and getting up at the same time every day. We know that people doing that report less fatigue. And there's another whole topic around sleep hygiene. Exercising a bit more. When you're feeling fatigued, you don't feel you can exercise. But actually, exercising increases our energy. So maybe think about what you can do that works for you. And there are many different types of exercises you can do. I've sent people with Cavernoma and other neurological conditions to the MS Society websites, because they've got exercise programs that are really comfortable to do sitting in a chair, but actually are designed for people with neurology and designed for helping fatigue. I've mentioned about eating. If we look at our diet and eat well, and healthily, if you're a vegan, obviously you wouldn't be eating probably meat, fish and that, but there are other dietary protein, but having lots of our fresh fruit and vegetables. I give up trying to work out how many we're supposed to have a day now. It used to be 5, then it went up to about 14, then it went down to 11, but just eating plenty is good. I don't know about you, I'm growing lots while we're in lockdown. Making sure you have starchy foods, but wholemeal bread and wholemeal pasta, because that is energy producing. And your diet, your milk and your fat foods, etc. So think about what you're intaking in if you're getting really fatigued. And also, a lot of these things you can prepare more easily. I've mentioned hydration. We had a load of these bottles at work for promotion, and I've given a load of them away. And it's funny watching staff walking around, and now they're saying, look, Anita, because I talk to them about this as well, because it's important they understand what they're talking about with their patients. We talked about that. I've talked about exercise. And again, when I talk about exercise, remember that slide with the 2 people balancing on one another? Again, it's about balance. Don't do too much, because you'll be really fatigued, and don't do too little. In normal times, I'd be saying, if you go to a gym, get a trainer at a gym to help you think about what to do. But just going for a walk around the block every day, if you're able to do that, you'll start walking half the road, and then the next day do that for 3 or 4 days, and then go 3/4 of the road and back to your house for a few days. Then do the whole road and back to your house. Just extend your exercise a little bit each day. Now, sleep is really important, and I've just mentioned about sleep hygiene. I wished we all slept like babies. As we get older, actually, we need less sleep, which doesn't help either. There is no how much is enough, okay? There's no set rule. I function probably very well in about 5.5, 6 hours a night sleep. But my husband needs a good 8. My daughter needs a good 10. We're all very, very different. And so if you're saying, but darling, I need to go to bed an hour earlier, that's okay. If you know that if you go to bed at 9 and get up at 7 and you feel that you've had a good night's sleep and you can function better during the day, that's fine. So think about how much is right for you of sleep. Don't get caught up with your Fitbits and all this saying you should have so much of whatever type of sleep. We've mentioned sleep hygiene, and as I say, that's a topic in itself. But again, any of these things I'm sharing, if you'd like a little bit more information, I do have little handouts and things. I'm very happy to share them. Relaxation. It may be just get in the bath, put some candles round. Make that part of your daily routine in the evening or bedtime routine, a time when you can just relax, just be by yourself, take a book, whatever. It may be just doing an exercise like that light body scan I did. Maybe doing some yoga or some Pilates, which are also exercise, but actually very, very relaxing. There's lots of relaxation CDs. I go onto YouTube, there's loads of relaxation sort of talks. Maybe use something like that, but create some time in your day where you can shut yourself away and just relax. And that can really help fatigue. Fatigue needs us to be accepting and caring and have communication. Life is life. When we talk about managing fatigue, we're not talking about taking away these wonderful things that give us life. Our laughter, our boundaries, our healthy relationships. All of these are really, really important. And what we're trying to do is help you think about what you may be able to do to reduce the fatigue impact on your life. So all of these things become more valuable to you again. So just to finish off, I just want to remind you, fatigue after Cavernoma does appear from reports that we get from yourselves to be a common problem. We know in neurology in general, it's a very common problem. If you find ways of managing it effectively, that will help you. But remember, it's very individual. How you are going to approach it will be very different to someone else. Be aware of your lifestyle and think about what you can do around it. And as I said, that activity sheet I showed you earlier may be helpful for you to think about that. And that may then help you change a few things in your lifestyle in order to help your fatigue. I've mentioned some techniques. I've said I can share more techniques if you need them. Now, I want to stress these techniques won't make fatigue go away. And it won't be possible to make all those changes immediately. And the first change I would suggest is look at your levels of activity and what activities make you the most fatigued. What I do know, though, is if we start fatigue management with people, it does have a significant impact on their quality of life. And I guess that's what I'm hoping this short talk may just help you think about.